Shalom uvracha, dear friends, congregational family. Rabbi Cantor, Texon here, welcoming you to this year's Purim Celebration, the beautiful festival of Purim, Chag Purim, the super joyous holiday of the Jewish people, occurring in the month of Adar, the 14th and 15th is Shushan Purim, the great celebration of the great victory over anti-Semitism in ancient Persia, the year 365 approximately BCE. The Jewish people living in ancient Persia, modern-day Iran, had already gone through the Babylonian exile, and then the Persian Empire really took over the Babylonian, and there they were as a Jewish community in Shushan, in ancient Persia. Faith in Judaism was waning, even though the community and a great section of that community still clung to Jewish observance. God's presence was being questioned. Were they abandoned? And anti-Semitism was all around. And they felt vulnerable and insecure. And the holiday of Purim basically recalls the triumph of the Jewish soul. Even in the darkness of the exile, when we feared, as I mentioned, that God may have abandoned us. On the contrary, God saved and delivered us from annihilation by actually stepping back and allowing the two heroes of the Purim story, Mordechai and Esther. Mordechai, the prominent Jewish leader of the community, and his niece, whom he adopted, it was like a daughter to him, they were allowed to step forward and change the destiny of our people. God steps back and lets humans take charge. God was the grand manipulator behind the scenes, the hidden revelation, the hidden power, that God is always with us in every generation. Mordechai convinced his beautiful niece, who became the queen of the empire after King Ahasuerus, known as really Xerxes in history, had her executed, removed. And as we all know, Esther won the beauty contest and he made her queen, and she had the power to promote her uncle to a position of power within the monarchy so that he could be a witness to the events in the royal court. And he convinced Esther that this was a do or die moment. Do or die. This is the moment. Seize the moment where you will plead with the king. You'll gain entrance to the king. After all, he told her, you secured a position for me to be about the royal palace, to witness and to hear. You will find favor in the king. You will seek his presence, and you'll be able to plead for our people so that harm and, God forbid, death will not come upon us. And she looked deep into her soul and realized that this was the moment. This was her divine mission to save her people. And she fasted and she demanded that her people pray and fast for 3 days prior to her supplication in person before the king. This illustrates her agonizing dilemma and the gravity of her mission and task. And that's why we have the Ta'anit Esther, the fast of Esther prior to Purim, remembering how dedicated she was in procuring the favor of the king, and that her life might be in jeopardy herself. The king was unaware that Esther was a Jewess, and she did it. Her prayers were answered, and this set in motion the complete reversal of fortune, where the evil decree was reversed, and the Jewish people were allowed to defend themselves against all enemies. And the archenemy, the villain of the whole plot, Haman, Harasha, Yamach Shemo, would be executed himself. Midah keneged midah, the very gallows that he built for Mordechai, who refused to bow before him as prime minister before he was removed by the king. The evil Haman himself was hung on the gallows he prepared for Mordechai. These series of events, the chain of events, were miraculous, and one laid the stage, prepared the stage for the next. The series of miraculous events, with God ordering these events and manipulating the events from behind the scenes. One of the main reasons we wear masks on Purim, not necessarily for COVID-19, which we are hopefully going to conquer, but to conceal our identities in memory of how God remained hidden during the 9 years of the Purim episode and story. Yes, God remained hidden, manipulating the events, and the name of God is not mentioned once in the Megillah, because God, as I said, stepped back and let humans affect the story. There is one amazing verse in the Megillah, which I'll read highlights of in a moment, which is a code for God's name, Yud He Vav He. When Esther pleads for a meeting, for a party, to invite the king and Haman to a wine fest, her words are Yavo HaMelech VeHaman. Yud He Vav He, the name of God. That Esther was not alone when she pleaded for her people. God was embedded in the words Yavo HaMelech VeHaman El HaMishteh. We are never alone. God forbid, when a person passes away and we comfort a family, we say Hamakom Yenachem Etchem to the bereaved, the plural. When a person is sitting, Shiva, you are not sitting alone. May God comfort you in the plural. You, the bereaved, are sitting with God. Etchem. You're not abandoned. And indeed, God never abandoned us, even though we cannot see Him. I will begin the reading of the Megillah with the brachot and then a few highlights. The Megillah is very special to me as a teenager in the yeshiva in Ramaz in New York. I read the concluding chapters, and it was always a great and special event with my colleagues, my student colleagues participating with me And it was a wonderful, deeply moving event, Purim in New York, as it is all over the world. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kideshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al mikra megillah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asa nisim lahavotenu בימים ההם בזמן הזה. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. ויהי בימי אחשוורוש, הוא אחשוורוש המולך מהוד וביד כוש 27 מדינה בימים ההם כשבט המלך אחשוורוש על כיסא מלכותו אשר בשושן הבירה בשנת 3 למלכו עשה משתה לכל שריו ועבדיו חיל פרס ומדי הפרטמים ושרי המדינות לפניו. As we know, when the king had a great wine fest, he asked his queen Vashti to parade in the nude. She refused, and he had her executed, and then he found a new queen, the beautiful Jewess Esther, and he made her queen. And she was in this position of power in the palace. Then we read about her beautiful uncle. איש יהודי היה בשושן הבירה, ושמו מרדכי, בן יאיר, בן שמעי, בן קיש, איש ימיני, אשר הגלה מירושלים, עם הגולה, אשר הגלתה, עם יחניה, מלך יהודה, אשר הגלה, נבוכדרצר, מלך בבל, ויהי אומן את הדסה, היא אסתר בת דודו, כי אין לה אב ואם, והנערה יפת תואר וטובת מראה, ובמות אביה ואימה לקחה מרדכי לא לבד. And the story then continues, and one night the sleep of the king was disturbed. This is following his promoting of Haman to be prime minister. He was disturbed. Nadadah Shenat HaMelech, and it's reminiscent of when the Pharaoh of Egypt could not sleep, and then good things happened for the people because the Pharaoh brought Joseph as an interpreter. Now the king asks for the record books, the chronicles. He suspected that there might have been a conspiracy against him, and sure enough, he was told that there were two conspirators, Bitan Vateresh, and Queen Esther emphatically told the king that Mordechai saved his life. Overheard the plot. He was a witness, which was one of his main purposes, and he foiled the plot of assassination of the king. And the king said, was this man ever rewarded? And Esther said, no. Just at that moment, Haman came in, thinking he was going to be promoted. And the king asked Haman, what should be done to the man who saved my life and saved my crown. And Haman said he should be recognized and honored. And then the king told Haman, well, guess what? I will honor Mordecai, who saved my life. And Haman was floored. He could not believe it. And he had to lead Mordecai on a beautiful white horse through the streets of Shushan in royal robes, leading the horse with Haman pulling on the horse to advance all through the town of Shushan. Following this, Esther, heeding the pleading of her uncle and the insistence of her uncle to act now in this do-or-die moment to save her people, because there had been an edict to destroy the Jewish people that Haman influenced the king to write. Esther summoned her courage and used that verse, Yavo HaMelech veHaman el HaMishteh. May the king and Haman come to my private party. And so it was. At this party, it was revealed that Haman was the villain and had plotted to hang Mordecai, who was just honored, and to destroy the Jewish people. And the king reversed his decree and ordered Haman hung on the very gallows he prepared for Mordecai. Haman and his 10 sons, Tolu al Ha'etz. And in the Megillah, the 10th son has a nun, and at the end of his name, the name of the 10th son, Vaizata. The Vav is elongated to illustrate a long pole on which all of the 10 sons were hung, along with Haman. And so the Jews were allowed to defend themselves against all enemies. And it took about a month before the decree, the reversal decree, reached all the inhabitants of Shushan and environs. But the Jews then took up arms against tremendous odds, a little bit reminiscent of the Hanukkah story. But we don't emphasize the military on Hanukkah. We emphasize it a little bit more on Purim, because our physical annihilation was threatened even more dramatically on Purim, more dramatically. And we were victorious, and we defeated militarily our enemies. And an extra day was celebrated on the 15th of Adar in Shushan Purim, in the walled cities. And so this was a great turning point in Jewish history, in that the concealed revelation of God, his divine manipulation, causing victory and proving that the destiny of Israel shall ever be triumphant, and our people's history shall continue forever in glory. Amen. Chag Purim, Chag Purim, Chag Gadol hu laYehudim, Masechot Rashanim, Zemirot Rikudim, Haval Risha Rash Rash Rash, Havanarisha Rash Rash Rash, Havanarisha Rash Rash Rash, Barashonim. Come and see our Purim spiel, mighty wonders we'll reveal of Purim, of happy Purim day. Get your groggers ready now while the actors take a bow and put on their masks in happy Purim day. See the Megillah slowly unwinding, and out comes Esther dancing with the king. Haman the villain, Mordecai the hero, each one has his turn to dance and sing. Lai 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 la la lai, lai 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 la la lai, lai 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 lai, lai 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 lai, lai lai la la lai, lai lai la la lai, lai lai la lai, lai la 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 la. We'll conclude with Shoshanat Yaakov, which is the most beautiful, following the blessing after the reading of the Megillah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, harav et riveinu v'hadan et dineinu v'hanokem et nikmateinu והמשלם גמול לכל אויבי נפשנו והנפרע לנו מצרינו. ברוך אתה אדוני הנפרע לעמו ישראל מכל צריהם, האל המושיע. שושנת יעקב צהלה ושמחה, בראותם יחד תכלת מרדכי. שושנת יעקב צהלה ושמחה, בראותם יחד תכלת מרדכי. תשועתם היית לנצח ותקוותם בכל דור ודור, להודיע שכל קובך לא יבושו ולא ייכלמו לנצח כל החוסים בך. שושנת יעקב צהלה ושמחה, בראותם יחד תכלת מרדכי. ארור המן אשר ביקש ליעבדי, ברוך מרדכי היהודי. ארור הזרש אשת מפחידי, ברוכה אסתר בעדי, וגם חרבון הזכור לטוב. שושנת יעקב צהלה ושמחה, בראותם יחד תכלת מרדכי. נצח ישראל לא ישקר. The destiny of Israel is forever, lanetzach, under God's great providence and salvation. Amen. Chag Purim Sameach.